Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Tennessee Concrete Conversations podcast. My name is Alan Sparkman. I'm the Executive Director for the Tennessee Concrete Association, and I'm excited today to welcome our guest, Walt Flood IV, who is a longtime friend and also deeply involved in the concrete industry from the testing side. I think Walt and I met in the Las Vegas desert.
We did.
Several years back with a bunch of crazy people trying to learn more about pervious concrete. So we share a pervious past, but we also I consider Walt a friend and a colleague, so I'm pleased to have you with us this morning. Walt, tell us a little bit about who you are, kind of maybe what you do. We're here at the ACI convention in Dallas, Texas today. Tell us something about your involvement with ACI and other industry organizations.
For sure. Thanks. Yeah, and it's a pleasure to get this opportunity. Yeah, we're here at ACI, American Concrete Institute in Dallas for the convention. I am involved all over the place at ACI. For a long time, I was the chair of student activities. So we have a big, successful student competition on Sunday mornings. We actually did Pervious yesterday, which was fun. We had about 30 teams from all over the world. And that was my big introduction to ACI. I recently rotated off the board, but I'm the chair of the chapter activities committee, which deals with local chapters and their relationship with nationals. Also a couple others like Students and Young Professionals Committee and EAC, which is educational activities. So I keep showing up, so I get volunteered for numerous opportunities. I also am at ASTM. I'm a subcommittee chair for the Pervious Committee there as well, and have been for a while. But yeah, I grew up in the industry, family business in Chicago doing testing and inspection. My great grandfather founded it in 1913, so we've been doing it for a while. We were basically focused in the high-rise market, but post-pandemic, high-rises aren't in as much demand as they used to be. So we're doing a little bit more infrastructure now, but we usually we've been doing it so long, if we were just doing slump and airs, we probably wouldn't do it any longer. So we usually like to play with new technologies and do that, just partly to keep it interesting after when it's all we do for forever.
Well, it's interesting, I think, that you're the fourth generation of flood testing, as you mentioned, in Chicago. And that's pretty rare in any industry, but I think that's something to really be proud of.
Yeah.
And you guys have, I've been to a couple of sessions here where we were talking about the history of the slump cone, which started somewhere around the same time flood testing started back in the early 1900s.
And that is helpful too, being the fourth. It's always Walt Flood. And you might not get the same one when you call, but you'll get a Walt Flood, at least for a while.
For over 100 years.
My wife said I couldn't have a fifth, though, so I guess maybe it ends with me. I don't know.
Well, there's always a lot of new things to talk about here at ACI, and it's a great place to meet really smart people and to kind of keep a pulse on what's happening. And to me, it's also what's going to happen in the industry. So from your perspective, I know you've been involved in previous years in a lot of research and development on ultra high strength concrete, some really cool stuff. But, what do you see as the challenge in the next 5 years? What are we going to be dealing with in the concrete industry?
Honestly, it's been the predictability lately. Just last week, the biggest job in the city of Chicago that we have going, that we were lucky enough to be on, called us that morning at 7:30 and said, we aren't going to get concrete today, which in the past, even when we had supply issues, those larger jobs were somewhat insulated, and maybe the smaller contractors weren't able to get any product because the larger customers were prioritized and kind of insulated from that. But this was the first time that it's just, there's no concrete. And that's been really surprising and difficult to deal with, as well as the how to adjust to that and the recent changes with 1L cement, using limestone in the cement, and how to kind of deal with those changes that were kind of surprising not that they happened, but that it happened all at once, and it seemed like from every producer. Definitely hadn't seen that in the past, where usually it seems like a more new technologies or new products is a more gradual rollout. And it was like snapping fingers. Like, oh yeah, by the way, next week you'll have different cement in all your mixes, which was interesting, especially with some of the governmental agencies, the less so the private jobs, but the ones that have really rigorous mix reviews, and you can only use this specific mix design that's super prescriptive. That those have been interesting hurdles to deal with. So how to approach all that.
And I think everybody's seen that, and the speed at which it happened is unusual and surprising. In Tennessee, our DOT we did not have issues. They were very accepting. There's always some issues on particular commercial work, but it's been a relatively smooth transition for us. But I think 2 years ago, nobody was even thinking about transitioning, and then today you don't really have a choice.
Right.
And the thing that's driving that, which maybe some people don't realize, it really comes back to, we were talking about ESG. I'll let you tell everybody what that is, because that's a big influence, and everything that revolves around sustainability.
Right.
And Type 1L cement is the Portland Cement Association's initial response to trying to lower the embodied carbon of cement.
Right.
And it just happened way faster than I think people were expecting. But there are other implications for ESG. So tell us a little bit about that and kind of what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think it kind of comes down to the press that somehow cement got picked out as the biggest culprit worldwide for carbon emissions from a manufacturing standpoint. The number I always hear is 7% of global emissions. And then you talk to any of the cement producers and say, oh, that's because it's global. If you just look at national, at U.S., basically North America, we're closer to 4%. But still, it's a big number. So we're in the crosshairs as the problem, I guess, from a carbon emission standpoint. So there's, from a corporate, especially the big corporations, there's a big push to be carbon neutral sooner rather than later. And so everyone's scrambling, and because concrete is kind of the lucky one in the spotlight, everybody ends up looking towards us to see how to reduce that and how to how do we make concrete without cement. It's really what it comes down to, which is somewhat problematic. And Type 1L cement does help with that significantly by essentially cutting the cement with another product. And if you grind it fine enough, it's going to react just from a surface area standpoint. I was really nervous when that first happened on how it would impact, especially the high-rise market in Chicago. We're usually doing another floor of a building every third day. So they're setting the next floor that same day they place the slab. So it's fast, super fast. So I was really nervous about how that would impact, basically using less cement. And I was surprised when it worked, but it seems like the amount of limestone in the 1L mix is creeping up, and there's some issues now starting to appear, but we still don't know. We're still figuring that part out, which I guess is fun and exciting. Well, in some ways, I don't know if the owners would agree.
Yeah, when you're on the 35th floor going up and you have a problem, I would say that's not necessarily fun. It could be exciting.
It depends from what. If I was the owner or the contractor with the owner staring at me, I probably wouldn't think it's as fun as being the testing lab trying to figure it all out. Right? Yeah, the engineer investigator in me gets very excited.
Yeah. Well, have not seen very many problems in our transition. Mm-hmm. You always hear of some.
Yeah.
So set times and water demand goes up.
Water, yeah. And
set times and then strength.
Yeah. And it seems to be out west in a lower humidity environment on large slabs that it's bleeding different. I think associated with the fineness, the water demand, that it's just behaving differently than the contractors are used to. But it seems to be where the humidity is really low, which we luckily don't have to worry about. in either of our markets, but that's what I've heard. But we personally haven't had too many direct issues.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing from our producers in Tennessee. It's been a reasonably smooth transition. The phone may ring after people hear this and say, "Wait a minute," but that's being driven by almost entirely by the desire to lower the embodied carbon in our product, which is being driven by what really owners and designers are demanding.
Right.
And I think that's the piece that sometimes at the ready mix side, we don't hear that. We're not involved in those conversations.
Right.
But that's a really big deal today.
Yeah. And there's going to be more and more pressure to do so. However, they don't really care. It's just how much less carbon can you use? And there's some standard calculators out. There's going to be a push to have individual mix designs with environmental product declarations. EPDs is going to become more and more prevalent throughout the industry, so that it's kind of an official way to track how much impact, how much embodied carbon you're using, so that you can prove to clients, to whoever's asking, where you're at, and that's going to become a real driving factor, I think, in the market, as far as, even I think, cost, it always comes down to the bottom line, right? How can you lower that total carbon amount because some executive for a large company decided, we have to show on paper that we're using less carbon or none. Even on my flight here, there's a menu item on the main. I was looking for the free movies on my Southwest flight, and one of the items I could select was offset this flight, and I could pay some guy to not cut down a rainforest somewhere to offset my carbon.
Yeah.
So that Southwest could eventually say that they're neutral. It was kind of interesting.
Well, and it's so prevalent. Again, something we don't necessarily see while we're out here delivering concrete, building buildings. But as those buildings are being designed, that's one of the things owners, not just designers, but owners are bringing to the table. Hey, we've got this pledge to be carbon neutral by some date, and that includes the carbon in this building. So handle it.
Yeah, we had a high rise that last winter we were going up, and usually they've got torpedo heaters everywhere. I mean, they have to run multiple inch gas lines to the building just to supply temporary heat. And they came back and said, we want you to do it with electric. And the electric demand for the equivalent of 9 billion BTUs or whatever the heck they're putting on these floors to maintain their schedule. It quickly, they entertained it for a day or two. But it wasn't feasible. But the pressure is going to increase. And figuring out how to get concrete with less cement to set with less heat, 30 stories up in 2 hours is
it's quite a challenge.
I guess it's a good problem for me to solve and save the day. I guess I don't know if it's possible, but
we're certainly pushing the limits of the material in ways we hadn't even considered that all revolve around embodied carbon. And so I think that's going to be a big topic of conversation going forward, particularly at places like, ACI, which now has their own, and they've had for several years, a sustainability council or initiative focused on concrete, which is good because those are important conversations. And, part of what I will take back to our folks in Tennessee is where that conversation is, and more importantly, what can we do to reduce the embodied carbon of our product.
And I think it's a good thing to maybe look at and be proactive on, and at least have some background knowledge before it's just a mandate and you're kind of left trying to catch up.
So we've worked on a program for our producers. In fact, I interviewed a gentleman named Will Paddock for our podcast a couple of months ago. But our producers, we've created a path for them to create their own mix-specific, plant-specific EPDs.
Great.
Because it's going to be something that people demand, and it's going to come up probably quickly. A lot like 1L.
Yeah.
You've never heard of it, and then next month you've got 3 projects
you don't have a choice,
at EPD. So that's something that we need to learn more about. And what's also really critical, and I find very frustrating, we certainly got a target on us because we use so much concrete in our buildings. And it's not that concrete is a really bad material in terms of embodied carbon. In fact, when you compare concrete to other materials, we stack up pretty well.
Yeah.
So we're not high embodied carbon, which you often hear, but the reason that the target is so big is because we use so much concrete. So we have to get better at telling that part of the story.
Yeah.
That, if you substituted in this building, if you substituted any other material for concrete, the overall embodied carbon in your building would almost always go up.
Yeah.
I mean, you're already using the best material.
Right.
And we need to get better at telling that part of the story. But the pressure is there, and there's no way we can avoid. We're going to have to continue to make improvements in our embodied carbon footprint. So I think there's going to be a lot of time and energy on that, and it's going to come back to testing and verification because we still have to maintain performance.
Right.
So that's the kind of the interesting path I think we're going to be on in the next the next few years.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else you see in the industry? We talked a lot about the kind of the ESG, the environmental social governance, which is now a part of what corporations report on, along with their profitability. That is a big part of what's driving embodied carbon. But what else are you seeing in the industry that you think's cool or that may impact us perhaps more than we think in the next 5 years?
Kind of the use of new technology. A lot of the things we do are the same things we've been doing, that my great-grandfather was doing, slump and airs and things like that. But the ability to use technology for monitoring has been picking up, like maturity temperature sensors. We've been using them extensively, even more than the companies, the manufacturers even understand. So we've actually started putting them in our cure boxes, our mobile cure boxes, our little coolers, and we put a maturity sensor in there, a temperature sensor, and ignore the maturity aspect of it, which is the ability to predict strength from a certain concrete, which we use on high-rise decks and things, but just to look at the temperature. And the sensor will give us data for a month, 2 months, and that gives us a protection for making sure that we're maintaining proper curing temperatures, or if we're in the middle of nowhere and we don't have power, we don't have much control of that, but at least what the temperatures were. But then it also actually has a secondary benefit where when those sensors are red, it records the GPS location. So now we've got a map of where all our cure boxes are, which sometimes became an Easter egg hunt in itself. When you've got 40 different placements in a day all over the region, where is that? And now we've got a map. Now we just have to remind everybody to actually do it. But there's a lot of benefits to using some of those techniques, even outside of maturity and using it for early opening of patches or accelerating schedules. There's a lot of benefits from that that are talked about more often. But from a practical standpoint, as a testing lab, there's some other ways to use the technology that really kind of help us on a functional standpoint too.
Yeah, we just got with the sensors, we've done some work with those, and TDOT will be announcing in the next spec book, which will be effective 1st of 23, but they're going to use those sensors in their job site curing environments for the same exact reason, to monitor the temperature.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a requirement, which is really good news for ready mix producers, because that's the thing that we fight the most is the acceptance cylinders are taken and they're in the sun or they're someplace way outside of the allowable temperature range. So that's a good thing about technology that's given us some protection. And it's interesting to hear that you're finding those same benefits from the testing side. Yeah,
exactly. From the opposite side, it helps keep our techs honest too, but then also gives us some insulation so that, if the ready mix sometimes we get it the other way too, where the ready mix producer's like, oh, the testing lab screwed it up, and at least we've got some backup to say, well, in some cases, yes, we're on a sidewalk placement, no power. We did the best we could, but yeah, there might be, which helps the the ready mix producer too. But
just having the data, knowing what the temperature profile was, is pretty important.
Yeah, it at least helps you, especially when you're troubleshooting too.
Yeah,
looking down potential problems. Do I have a bigger potential issue here that I need to look into, or can I attribute this maybe to curing temperatures?
Yeah. Well, great, Walt. Thank you for taking time out of a busy schedule at ACI to be with us and to bring us some insights. So thank everybody for joining us, and stay tuned for the next edition.
Thanks, Alan.